you can fill my nights, oh, and blow out all my lights, till I see nothing but my emotion.
Welcome back. It's Harvey Brownstone again with Jim Keaton, president of the official Helen Reddy fan club, with part 4, if you can believe it. Yes, we are back. I must say that, Jim, once again, the overwhelmingly positive feedback and popular demand for yet another session with you brought us back. So here we are. Thank you again for wanting to do this.
Well, I'm thrilled to do it, and I'm thrilled that we're getting such a good response.
I understand you have a couple of quick corrections or updates from the last session.
Yes, fixing an error. Helen's first husband was not Tom Wheat, it's Kenneth Wheat. And I wanted to tell you how I Am Woman is doing on the Amazon sales charts. I checked with them yesterday, and they rate between 300,000 and 400,000 movies a week. Right now, I Am Woman is number 212 in documentaries. I really don't know how it ended up in documentaries, but I'll take 212. And it's number 3,297 in drama. So I think that's doing very well. And they did sell out the first week. They sold all the videos they had on hand, so they quickly had to get more. So I think that's a very positive sign.
If someone were to buy the DVD of the movie, are there bonus features that we should know about?
Well, there are some interviews with some of the principals, with the director, with the stars, with the producer. So there are some interviews, yes.
Any deleted scenes?
Not that I can remember.
Oh, okay. Well, this session of Harvey interviewing Jim is going to focus on your role as fan club president.
Okay.
How did it come about that you became president of her fan club, the official fan club?
Well, you know the story of me writing a letter to Helen and her writing back and Capitol contacting me. And they were looking for somebody that would be willing to basically just handle mail and questions from fans, because they were getting a lot of mail because Helen was doing very well. And I was very young at the time. And I said, well, I'm not sure what I'm doing, but they said, we'll help you. And I said, well, if you'll help me, I'll do whatever you ask me to do. And that's how it started. They started sending me letters to answer. They started sending me itineraries. Every time Helen's itinerary changed, they would send it to me so that I would have it. If somebody called Capitol wanting to know where Helen would be, they would call me and give me the information, the phone number, that if the person had left one, I would contact them. So I used to call people all over the country. I wasn't doing so much international then calling because of money issues, but all over the country, calling people to let them know when tickets would go on sale, that Helen was coming, especially when she was doing colleges. She used to do a lot of colleges and state fairs. So the information sometimes was not as readily available as it should have been, in my opinion. So it was good to have somebody that was willing to take the time to do that, which I certainly was, and Capitol helped me every step of the way.
Now, it's obvious to me that if you wrote to Helen and then Capitol Records asked you to take on this function, Helen had something to do with it.
Well, actually, I think what happened, I know that Jeff asked Capitol to contact me because Lori Shipp, who worked at Capitol, said that Jeff wanted her to call me and ask me that question. So I know that Jeff had either seen the letter or Helen had told him about the letter, or somehow they had discussed it. And so Jeff's the one who asked them to contact me.
Now, what were your major functions and responsibilities as the president of the fan club? Were you given a budget, for example?
Well, I charged $3 a year for membership, but basically my job was to send out things that Capitol, like when someone sent a letter to Capitol and asked for a photo. If they asked for an autograph photo, Capitol would handle that because I didn't have direct contact with Helen at the time. If they just asked for a photo, or they wanted to know about an interview that she had done, or had questions about like People magazine and things like that, they would send me the letters and I would answer the questions. The other thing that I learned very quickly how to do was to help people get tickets to shows. Because in those days, you had to line up
Right.
and, sometimes for days to get tickets to shows that were selling quickly. And Helen was very popular, so her tickets sold very quickly. It helped fans to know, weeks in advance that on a certain date, tickets are going to be going on sale, so you need to be ready. Capitol would also occasionally let me know when there was going to be a show that wasn't going to be announced until the last minute. Like some shows like the Bicentennial, there was a huge show at an area in DC called the Capitol Center, which was an arena that held thousands of people. And they were not going to announce the performers until a couple days before July 4th. Capitol let me know that Helen was going to be one of the performers. So some of us who went to the show were able to get front row center because we knew in advance that we had to be there early, not just, this is going to be somebody we want to see. The other thing I learned quickly is getting to know people who work at venues like box office managers and people that sell tickets and things like that helps a lot. And when you have a group of people that are like Ready Fans United, the focus was on the united part because we really did present a united front supporting Helen. And whatever she was, whatever business she was appearing at, whatever hotel she was appearing at, we would stay there if we could afford it. Quite frequently, I would book a group of rooms at a hotel nearby, especially in Atlantic City or places where the prices were a little out of our reach. So it makes a big difference when you book 20 rooms and they know that you're coming. So it helped a lot.
Did you have contact with other fan club presidents for advice, to consult?
No, one of the reasons, well, let me back up a little bit. Fan clubs at that time, and still in some cases, have a very bad reputation.
They do.
With the stalkers and the screaming, preteen girls and all that. So when they have a male calling, it was, I think in a lot of cases, took them by surprise. The other thing that I think took them by surprise is most of us were older. We were in our older teens, 20s. We've been doing this for a long time. So we were older and we weren't presenting the image that a lot of people thought a fan club was going to be. We wore our t-shirts and we did all that to our buttons and everything, but we weren't disrespectful. We weren't destructive. So we weren't tearing down signs or anything like that that some fan club membership has a reputation of doing. So I think that made a big difference. And then when buying blocks of tickets, when I did that, they knew that we were willing to spend the money. So it wasn't 3 people calling and then 2 more. It was, I would call and say, I need to buy 30 tickets for this show. Or at our biggest hit, Anton's in DC, 125 tickets for this week of shows. That makes a big difference. And it looked really, really good for Helen. It reflected well on her, which was always my goal.
But you didn't deal with other fan club presidents to try to get expertise on how to move forward with a club?
No, there was an organization called the National Organization of Fan Clubs, and they would help you if you needed guidance on how to write a newsletter or how to put a newsletter together. But I had seen some of the newsletters that were being published, and it was almost too, I don't really mean this disrespectfully, but too teeny bopper. And I didn't want to do that. Now, when you see the first newsletters I published, you will not be impressed at all, I assure you. But I learned quickly. And this was done before we had computers. So I was doing it on a manual typewriter, drawing lines with a ruler, a lot of handwritten stuff. But the information was getting out there, and that was the goal. And then with Capitol sending information to people, they also, Helen's office was absolutely wonderfully supportive. They would send me packets of letters and call me and tell me, you need to call this person and let them know whatever the issue was, that Helen won't be able to meet them. Or I was doing the PR part of keeping the fans happy.
And did Capitol finance that, or was it all from the $3 a year that people paid?
If I called Capitol and said, I need some help here with postage, they would help.
And whose idea was it to produce a newsletter?
Me.
You did.
I thought there's got to be some way to get information out on Helen that looks professional. And as I said, it took me a while to learn what professional was. And I had seen newsletters for other things like collectors organizations and things like that. And they were very slick and very well done. I knew I could never do that as a 16-year-old, but I could at least try to get the information out there, which was my goal. And I would do things like have fan of the month or fan of the whatever issue it was, fan of the quarter or whatever. So people were getting to know each other. So through the fan club, people were becoming friends. And then as we started to spread, we started spending a lot more time together. We would have parties at each other's houses after
How big a group
concerts.
are you talking about in the early days?
It started with six
Six members.
people, and some of them were in Canada. I want you to know.
Warms
And-
my heart.
Yes, right. And we ended up, I think when the last time I actually kept count manually, I had about 2,500 people on the mailing list. And this was before computers. So licking stamps, sealing envelopes, that was a lot of sealing of envelopes, let me just tell you.
Yeah, I was just going to say this was quite a big operation to create a newsletter every month and then get this thing printed, mailed out.
Yes.
You had to deal with all kinds of requests from fans
Yes.
and whatever
I-
Capitol Records wanted you to do. And of course, what everybody wants to know, how involved was Helen in the beginning?
She was very involved in the sense that if I asked her for something or, I would get requests from people for autographs. If I sent the request to her, she would send back an autograph photo and I would mail it to the person that had requested it. My goal was to have a monthly newsletter. That didn't last very long because I was working a full-time job. Well, first going to school and then working a full-time job at a police department. And so sometimes it was quarterly, sometimes it was depending on Helen's schedule and her career. If I have a itinerary that's 6 months out, then I didn't have to publish something every, month. I would call people to let them know if changes were made. Sometimes I would get calls from people who were having a problem getting tickets. So I would call the box office and tell them who I was and what I was looking for. And I can't tell you how many times people would say, oh, I can help you with that. And I would get tickets in the first or second row for people.
So
I was
really, you know what, as I'm listening to you, it strikes me that you were actually a human website.
I was.
You
Yeah.
were fulfilling the function of what a website would do now, where you want to know what's going on, what's the tour schedule, where can you get merchandise. By the way, did the club have T-shirts and other merchandise, buttons?
Yes, we did. One of the things that I really liked doing was when we had a fan club event, and that's when a group of us got together to go to shows. And by group, I mean more than two. I would have something made that I would either give or sell, depending on what it was I had made at that show, so that they would have something they couldn't get anywhere else. So I had pins made, I had T-shirts made, I had posters made. Capitol used to send me, every time an album was released, they would send me posters to sell to raise money for the fan club. I'm now going through storage and I have some of those that I'm going to offer to people that couldn't get them any other way. For instance, right now on the website, I have the Reddy poster. When Capitol sent those to me, they sent 100 pounds of posters.
Wow.
That was a lot of posters to keep, track of, mail out, pack. So there was a lot of time spent. I got to know the post office very well too, let me tell you.
For sure. Now, the question, of course, on everybody's mind, when did you first meet her? How did that meeting come about?
The first meeting did not happen, and I was so devastated. Capitol had arranged for me to meet her at a show in the Washington, D.C. area. It was October 12th, 1973.
73.
Yeah, 73. And so I went up, I did what they told me to do. I went to the stage door and I asked for Jeff. He was expecting me. And when I asked for him, they wouldn't even tell him I was there. An interesting thing about that is I told you before, I think I have an angel with their hand on my head. I called the hotel where I knew that, or I thought that Helen was staying when she was performing at that theater. It was called Shady Grove Music Fair. And they connected me to her room. And Jeff, I know, when she's, one of the biggest selling female vocalists in the world. And Jeff answered the
You mean
phone.
you just phoned the hotel and said, could you please connect me to Helen
I
Reddy's
just
room?
phoned the hotel and I said, this is Jim Keaton. Could I speak with Helen Reddy? And they said, one moment, please. And I thought, now they're going to, connect me to some. And so Jeff answered the phone, and which shocked me to no end. But that's how he knew that I was coming to the stage door. Capitol had already told him, but I told him, I'll be there tonight. He said, come back after the show. I'll make sure that somebody's there to meet you. Well, the guy that was security wouldn't even let me get close enough to tell them that I was there. So I was really devastated. And I was so upset about that. The second time when I actually did meet Helen was October 1st, 1976.
You mean you waited 3 more years?
I did. I had to. I was devastated. Actually, it was that long until I could get to a show, because I'm now, what, 17 and 18? So I don't drive. So I had to find somebody to take me to these places. And so until I had a group together,
I've just got to say it. Don't you think Capitol Records, with the millions of dollars they were making on her and the function you were performing for free, could they not have arranged for you to meet her sooner than that?
They could have, but this may be a character flaw in me, but one of the things is I hate to accept things for like comp tickets and things like that, because my philosophy is I'm here to help you make money. And if I'm taking free from you, then I'm not fulfilling my job. And in my whole life, I have only taken tickets twice. Once was at a show in Provincetown. And when they offered comp tickets, I didn't want them. The promoter said, I want to give them to you. They gave them to me. I made a donation of the same amount of those tickets to one of their charities. The second time, or the first time, I had bought tickets in Tennessee, and Helen was performing at it was sort of like a festival, and Roy Acuff and Chet Atkins were there. She was this headliner, and those are country music performers. And I bought tickets, and we get there, and we are literally, this was a huge arena, we are literally third balcony under the spotlight. I bought tickets, right as they went on sale. I was so upset. So I went to Helen's security person, whose name was Chris Arnstein, who I have absolute love for. He treated me so wonderfully all those years. And he has since died, but he was a wonderful person. He said, I'll take care of that. So he tells me to wait. I wait. He comes back, and he has 2 tickets for us, and we're second row center on the aisle. And he said, Helen has a clause in her contract about tickets, and we fixed that. So that's the only other time I've ever taken something for.
I wish I had known you back then, because this is not okay. You were doing a heck of a lot of work to promote her for free for the record company. And it took them till 1976 for you to actually meet her. So tell us, how did you meet her? What happened? How did you get back? Was it backstage?
Yes. So, well, first of all, you have to understand that there were thousands of people trying to get to meet her.
Yes, but you were the president of the fan club. Well,
so Lori Shipp, who worked at Capitol, I told her what happened the first time, and by then she knew me. She knew that I wasn't, I'm not going to go away. I'm going to be here as long as you need me. And she said, I'll make sure it happens. And I went to the state fair. There were 2 shows. They said, go backstage go back to the stage door after the first show, and we'll have somebody waiting for you. And I thought, I've been through this before. I know what's going to happen. So I get back there. I'm this shy, and believe it or not, I was very shy and not assertive at all. At all.
I believe it, because I would never have waited that long.
So I get back there, and a person comes up to me and says, are you Jim Keaton? And I said, yes. and he said, Helen's waiting for you. And I thought, okay, I'm about to faint. So I went backstage, and just so you know, Helen is 5'3", or was 5'3", and I'm 5'6". In the picture that I have with her, I look like I'm a lot taller than her. And it's so funny, we were both wearing blue jumpsuits. I want you to know that it was 76 and I was wearing blue suede platform shoes. So I look like I'm that much taller than her. I thought, afterwards, I thought I could have easily fallen off those shoes, broken my neck right in front of her. So I had an album which was still sealed, and I couldn't get the wrapping off. And she said, would you like me to do that for you? And I said yes. And then I told her the Carol Burnett story about Cary Grant, how I don't know what else to say to you. So you're a credit to your profession.
Now, she knew who you were at that point, correct?
Yes.
She knew that you were the one that Capitol had asked to run her fan club.
Yes. And actually,
what did you talk about?
Well, actually, before that, I had gotten a couple of other letters and cards from her. So she was corresponding with me in the sense that she let me know that she knew that I was out there still. After I said, you know, you're a credit to your profession, and she laughed and hugged me and signed my album. We talked about the fan club and what she wanted, and she just wanted somebody and she gave me written permission, because at that time it was a little bit of a problem if you didn't have written permission from the performer to actually be selling merchandise that had their name on it or things like that, or doing the things I was doing, calling, in a sense, representing myself as Helen Reddy or connection to her. So she gave me written permission for the fan club, told her what I was doing. She said, keep up the great work. And from that point on, it was every time there was a show, she saw us. I would let her know how many people I would be bringing backstage. She would see us. We would
every time,
unless there was something that she had no control over. Like sometimes there would be VIPs there, like in DC when Betty Ford attended the show. We couldn't go back then because of Betty Ford was there and Gerald Ford was there and Secret Service and all that stuff. So we couldn't go back then. But when she performed with the Air Force Band in DC, there were a lot of representatives and senators there. Helen asked for two of us to come back, me and one other person, even though we had to be checked by Secret Service and all that. It was important enough for her to know, I've got people out there. I want them back here too.
Did you ever tell Jeff that he screwed up in 1973?
Yes, I did. Well, I didn't tell Jeff he screwed up. I told him he needs to take care of the person who screwed up. He said, don't you worry about that. Another time we were at a show and a person tried to tell me that I had to leave. And this was when I was, Helen and Jeff are there, and the meet and greet's over, and Helen's still talking to me, and they say, we have to clear this area, you need to leave. And when I said before that Jeff was very protective of me, I saw the protective side of Jeff. Oh no, he's not going anywhere until I say he's going somewhere, and he's not going anywhere. So Jim, you can have a seat. So we were there for the rest.
Everything really changed in 1976. That's when you really developed a regular capacity to see her.
Yes.
And talk to her. And how would you say the friendship developed? How did you manage to turn the presidency of the fan club into this very personal friendship?
It was just another one of those things where we clicked almost immediately. It felt like we had known each other forever. She treated me with respect. She trusted me. I mean, she would talk to me about things that were, something that might have bugged her, something that got on her nerves before the show, or somebody that had done something, or a lighting person did this, because she knew that I think she had that innate sense to know who she could trust and who she couldn't. And I think that she knew that I was going to be one of those people. She knew I wasn't going to go anywhere. I mean, I've been around for, at that point, 3-5 years, having seen her twice and having written several times and her sending me cards and things. So she knew enough about me to know that I wasn't going to be going anywhere. And then I think I became sort of a comfort to her. I think sometimes when she would see me in the audience, sometimes audiences are dead.
I can't imagine that at one of her concerts.
this kind of applause. Oh, that doesn't happen with us there. We would not be disrespectful, but we would make a little bit of noise. And then pretty soon the whole place is making a lot of noise.
Yes.
So it's almost like once they get permission to express themselves, an audience then feels safe doing so. It's not like it is now where people start that, from the very beginning.
Did you tell her right away that you were gay, or how did she find out?
Well, I had told her in the letter, but I also told her, she was on the Mike Douglas show, and I thought maybe she was just saying that to me in the letter, just to, the thing she said to me, just to appease me, or just to be nice. She was on the Mike Douglas show, and Mike Douglas said to her, "What would you do if your son brought home a boy and said that he was in love with him?" And I thought, "Oh, this could be a moment of truth."
That's quite the question to ask in those days.
I know. And she said, "Well, Mike, I would want to get to know him just like I would if it was a girl." And I thought, oh, thank God. So she knew she knew her nephew is gay.
Do you think when she met you that she connected you to that letter, even though that was 1976?
Oh, I think so. Absolutely.
Really?
I think, yeah, I do. Yes. And because one of the things she talked to me about was her nephew, Tony Sheldon, who is gay. And she loved Tony Sheldon. I mean, she called him Sheldon because his mother's name is Tony and his partner's name is Tony. So there were 3 Tonys. So Lamont Sheldon and then Tony Sheldon's partner. And she told me about him, and she told me about difficulties he had growing up. So I think she definitely knew who I was and associated me with that letter. I think when you have a child, in effect, telling you that they want to kill themselves, you don't forget that.
Yeah, but on the other hand, it was years before you met her in person. So, I just feel so bad that there was that period of time. I'm sorry, I think it should have happened sooner, but I'm very glad it did,
Yes.
that it finally did happen. So once you and her really clicked and became friends, and you were seeing her more often, did the fan club change?
No,
What you were
actually,
expected to do and her degree of involvement in it?
not well, yes, in the sense that I was sort of viewed as the connection between her and the fans. So if she wanted a group to do or not do something, she would tell me, and then I would make sure that did or did not happen. Like there were times when she said no photos because there was a reason, something was going on. She didn't like her picture taken while she was eating. So there were times when we were having lunch or dinner at the same time she was. So she would say, "Please, no photos," because you know how people publish photos of people as they're eating, and I've seen plenty of those. I hate it. So I would do that. Or she might say, "I'm really tired, so I'm only going to see 10 people. So you tell me which 10 people you're bringing, and that's fine." So there were times that I had to upset people by telling them, "You're not going to be one of the 10. But most of the time, those people that weren't one of the 10 or whatever had already met her once or twice or 3 times. So I was trying to be fair with the many, many people that wanted to meet her. And my goal was to protect her from resenting that she was giving us the access she was. And she never, ever charged for meet and greets. She never charged for autographs at those time, unless, she did autograph shows later where she did. But now meet and greets are, $8,000-9,000 to just get a picture taken, and you can't even talk, or you can't get an autograph. They'll give you a pre-signed autograph. So Helen was appreciative of her fans even from the beginning. She remembers when there were only a few people in the audience, and she used to talk about that. She's performed for 6 people, 10 people, 12 people. So when there's a lot of people interested, she's happy about that.
Did you ever get people write to you with songs that they wanted to get to her?
Yes, and that was one of my duties. One of my duties was to make sure that those lyrics or whatever were returned with a letter explaining that she could not accept submissions like that because of legal issues. If she were to accept those lyrics and in a song, and somebody says, "That's my song," and sues because they had sent the lyrics in and she had seen them that would have been a problem. The other thing that one of my jobs was to do was if we were at a reception or something like that, and somebody came up and wanted to sing a song to her, my job was to make sure that they didn't do that. And it wasn't rude. It was just, no, she can't, we can't do this. There's reasons we can't, so please don't do that. There were a couple times where things were uncomfortable and I had to let security know, but those happened very, very few times.
Yeah, I was just, you've segued nicely into my next question, which was, what were the challenges of running this fan club? Because Jim, the longer I hear you talk about your role, I am of the view that this was much more than a fan club. You were almost a personal manager.
I viewed myself
not managing the bookings and the tour traveling and all of that, but a personal PR person, a personal support worker, if for lack of a better term.
I sort of did fulfill that responsibility gladly. And I always, Helen and I could read each other very well. And I could tell there were times when she would get irritated with me or upset with me. And I could tell that, and I know whatever is going on needs to stop, whatever it is.
What would you do that would irritate her?
Well, it might not be me. It might be someone else around us who, a fan that won't, well, I'll give you an example. She's doing a meet and greet. And so we have a group of people coming through, and a fan had, and I'm not exaggerating, about 50 albums for her to sign. So I knew that that was not going to be an acceptable number of albums, but she gave me a look that was like, do something. And I did. I told him she can sign 3, but that's it. No more after that. And he didn't want to leave. So I asked security and they moved him on, and we continued with the signing of the autographs. There were times when people would want, I got so many inappropriate requests and letters addressed to her. People would ask for money. People would say that, one of the ones that I turned over to her security people was a man who wrote, probably a 20-page letter saying that God had intended Helen for him and that they were meant to be together. So I was sort of the one that, I wasn't security, I'm not saying that, but I was the one that sort of felt people out and let her know that this might not be a good idea right now.
That was
or
a
that
big
we need to watch.
responsibility, Jim.
It was, but I was always good at it.
It's way, way beyond responding to correspondence and letting people know when concerts are and writing a newsletter. You were much, much more than a fan club president, because that gets into the area of personal security.
And I would never, I can't say I would never, but I'm a lover, not a fighter. And I would have had a very difficult time confronting somebody physically, but I would have said, I did say, this is not acceptable and we can't let this happen. And if you don't stop, then I'm going to get security. And there were a couple times where I had to do that. And there was always somebody else there with Helen. So, she wasn't being left alone.
So it wasn't just you. There would be other people there to help.
There would be somebody from the venue, or when she had Chris Arnstein, who was her security person and road manager, he was absolutely wonderful. We worked wonderfully as a team. I would be sort of bringing the people in and introducing them to Helen, and they would get their autographs and their photos and things like that and have a few minutes to talk with her. And then he would escort them out. So it was a really good partnership that worked very well. And then once I started seeing Helen more often and we became more friends instead of, fan club versus star, one of the things that Bette Midler used to say was the best way to distance a fan is to employ them. Hire them to do a job. And I thought, well, maybe that's what Helen's doing with me, but it wasn't that at all. And when we went out or when we went to receptions or to events, it was very clear that there was a relationship there. She invited us to the premiere of a movie called Shirley Chisholm, Unbought and Unsold. It's a documentary about Shirley Chisholm, and they use I Am Woman as the theme song. And Helen invited Mark and I to the premiere. And it was so strange to be sitting there with all these celebrities around us. And I really don't care because the one that's most important to me is sitting right next to me. That
For
was such a
sure.
strange feeling. But she used to sit me on one side of her, like at dinner, or when there were fan club groups together. She would sit me on one side of her and Mark on the other, so that she had a buffer, so that, you know, she felt secure and safe with the two of us surrounding her.
I get the impression that part of the reality of a fan club and someone in your position in a fan club is that there's a certain small percentage of what I would call lunatic fringe who are beyond groupies. They become obsessive. They have some kind of disorder that makes them latch on to the celebrity in an inappropriate
Yes.
way. That must have been very challenging for you, because I don't think that at 16 years old you understood that Capitol Records, when they asked you to do this, that you would have that role as well.
I didn't even understand what that role was until I started doing it. And by now I'm getting older, and I started working for the police department I worked for when I was 20. So I started learning a little bit about the signs of people who are becoming a little too attached or who are becoming obsessed with people. So I would see that. I would see people that would show up and leave letters on our car has a tag, H Reddy, and would leave letters, sexual innuendo letters on our windshield for Helen. And I would always let her know, and security, if there was security, know that, you know, this person is here, especially when she's going to be performing for more than one night at that venue. Or I would have fans who would try to find out where she was staying and then spend hours in the lobby just in case they got to see her.
I hate to say this, but I probably would have been one of those fans back in my late teens.
But yeah, I think you would have known when the time would have been to stop.
Oh, yeah, when
you
I
know,
got thrown out.
when she says, hello, I'm leaving, I have to keep going, that's the time to stop.
Yeah, but I think if I had to be thrown out, being thrown out by you, I think most people watching would figure it's worth it.
Yeah, let's go somewhere else. That was one of the most rewarding things, though, was when we were together as groups. And, you know, the show was important, obviously. We were there for that purpose. But doing things together afterwards, like going to dinner, or some of us have traveled together. There was a reception at a fan's house, and Helen came. And she felt involved enough and appreciative enough to participate in things like that.
She felt comfortable enough.
Yes, that's a better word.
Yeah.
And she also felt comfortable enough to say, no, I'm not feeling like it, or I'm tired, I need some rest, whatever. And I was okay with that, and I was okay with telling other people that. Sometimes people didn't want to hear it, but I'm sorry. I mean, I've been told things like, you don't own Helen Reddy. And my answer to that was, no, I don't own her, but I'm here to protect her. And that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, it's a big job. And I think you're giving people a real insight into what was actually involved. It's not all glamour, and it's not all fun. Tell me, the Helen Reddy website, were you involved in that? Did you manage it?
No, Jordan has been involved in that, and he's the one that developed it. And it is coming back. It was having some issues. It's been taken down. It's being redesigned, and all of the things that were on there before, some product like Helen's book that is actually read by Helen, an audio recording of the book, which is actually available now. And I have posted the link on the Facebook page to get that. But all of those things are going to be available. He is working on that. I am not a computer person, as you well know.
Well,
it took me forever to learn how to do Facebook.
But you do it well. You put a lot on there.
Thank you.
One fan wanted me to ask you, did you ever interview Helen?
Did I ever I interviewed Helen all the time. It just wasn't to be published.
Why not?
We talked
Why did
about.
you never sit down with her, even with a cassette recorder, and do an interview?
because we talked about all kinds of things all the time. And I knew that there were things that, I mean, I know the difference between something that is personal and that she would want other people to know, and things that are, for
Private.
yeah, exactly. So we were talking all the time, and we would talk about anything. I mean, and everything, believe me. And it was just, if I had a question, I just ask it. And she
I
would do the
think
same
what
thing with me.
happened, I think she stopped seeing you as a fan and saw you as a close friend and confidant.
But I hope so. I think that's exactly what we became. And I
And
think
once
that
that
happened.
happened, it wouldn't have felt right for you to sit down and do with her what I'm doing with you.
No, absolutely not.
That's what happened.
So many times we would be at a show or after a show, and there's a reception, and there would be people there that wanted to interview her. And I can't tell you how many times she would say, interview him. He knows it just as well as I do.
That's a huge compliment.
I
That is a huge compliment. I'm mindful of the time, so I'm pushing you a little bit because I want to get
Okay.
all the questions in that
Okay.
people want.
Okay.
How do you see the fan club evolving in the future? Activities, publications, the involvement of her children?
I haven't actually talked to Tracy and Jordan about that. I do know right now they are finding comfort in the webpage and all of the interaction with the webpage and the things that are being posted. I am working on the final Red report, and somebody sent me a message and said, please don't say that. I don't mean that the webpage is going to go away. It's not. It's just that I'm not going to be doing a newsletter or that format. I'll be doing it on the webpage. So as long as there's more than just me, and that means one other person is interested, I'll be doing it.
Do you think that there could be some organized activities in the future? Maybe some kind of memorial event?
I would love to do that. I think I told you I have purchased a bench at the Motion Picture and Television Fund Country Home that's going to be going in the Roddy McDowell Garden, which is Helen loved. It's a rose garden. So I will be going there sometime as soon as we can fly to visit the bench and to go with some of Helen's family members so that we can, just celebrate her there for a moment. I'm going also to check with the MPTF and see if people can come visit the bench. I mean, it sounds silly to have a bench, but it's a garden where Helen loved to spend time. So just to be able to sit there and contemplate, just think about her and appreciate her and know that she was there and that she spent a lot of time in that garden means a lot to me.
Is there a grave that people can visit?
No.
There is not.
No.
All right. The big question, Jim.
The
Are you
big
ready
one.
for it?
Yeah.
Are you going to write a book?
It's so strange. I have never considered doing that seriously.
Well, I'm surprised.
Well,
Because in these, first of all, you must have seen the response to the first 3 interviews we've done. Secondly, you see the response you get on the Facebook page. Thirdly, there is no one, with maybe the exception of her children, and I'm not sure because they would have been too young during the 70s to really understand what you understood. I don't think there's anyone else that has that knowledge but you.
Well, so I am looking at the possibility. I would discuss it with Tracy and Jordan first, and I would certainly let them read the manuscript first. As I'm putting these things together and doing the newsletter and going through trunks of material and all of that, I have thousands of resources on Helen. And it's a shame that as we talked before, that only a part of her career and her life is discussed. And it's usually either the sordid part about the divorce or just I Am Woman. And there's so much more to her as a person. And
Well, we've done it.
yes. And I think that story needs to be told. And I am
You know what I
considering
think you should call the book?
What?
You're My World.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking of calling it Helen Reddy, the Music of My Life.
Yeah, Jim, on behalf of the tens of thousands of fans that are watching, I think you should write a book. And I think that it would be something that would be very much cherished by every fan, and it would complete the story that she was too modest and too humble to tell herself in her own book.
Yes, and it would not, I assure you, would not be a dirt-filled, the deep, dark side of Helen Reddy where I get questions sometimes from reporters, especially right after Helen passed, who wanted to know, all kinds of things that are really none of their business, number one. But number two, I'm not the type of person that would say, oh, sure, I'll tell you that awful thing that happened. No, it's not going to happen like that. It never
But I
will.
don't even understand that. This woman never drank.
Never.
She has no criminal record.
No.
She, to my knowledge, was never accused of committing any kind of criminal offense or fraud or embarrassing incident. So she got divorced a couple of times. So what? I don't know what dirt people would think there was. They're just
Well, and I respect the press. One of my goals originally was to be a journalist, but I think sometimes if it's not the sordid part of life, they don't want to hear it. For instance, and I can give you an example. I know we're almost out of time, but I can give you an example. Helen was going on Good Morning America to promote Imagination. And while she was on the way, she got a call in the car telling her that they didn't want to discuss the album, that they wanted to discuss the divorce and what was going on with Jeff. And if she didn't want to do that, then don't show up for the interview. And she didn't show up for the interview. I mean, how ridiculous is that? I also think that a lot of people, especially after they've passed on, people try to make them something they're not. One of the most important things that I have always tried to do with people that I love, people that I respect, is recognize that they're human and they have frailties. They have issues just like the rest of us, and it doesn't make them any less important or any less valid than anybody else. And just because you might be a million-selling female vocalist, and I hate it when they say female vocalist, that they do all the time, a Grammy winner and all that, it doesn't mean you're not human and you don't have feelings.
Well, I think that your capacity to blend the professional Helen with the personal Helen has been very enlightening. You are a wealth of information. You're also a focal point for, all of us baby boomers grew up with Helen Reddy and her songs and that era, and listening to her music, watching the clips on YouTube of her performances on award shows and variety shows and Midnight Special. That's our youth. That's very nostalgic for all of us, and you preserve all of that. So I hope that these interviews have inspired you to consider writing down all your memoirs before, as Barbara Streisand says, before your memories become too misty and watercolored.
That's right. One other quick thing.
You do have a lot to tell us, and I think it would be of great interest.
Thank you. One of the things that Helen loved kids, and there's a little boy in Henderson, Nevada named Jacob. I'm gonna cry again. And Jacob loves Nora, and Helen wasn't feeling very well one day, and we went to see her, and Jacob had sent her a gift, and he had drawn a picture, and there was a picture of him, and I showed it to her, and she started crying, and I was just like, this is what I'm here for. I'm here to make sure that she's okay, and that these moments she gets to share because I have an opportunity to share them with her.
And I think you enriched her life enormously. She was very, very blessed, Jim, to have you in her life. All of us are very blessed because vicariously through you, we have gotten to know an entertainer that's so beloved. On behalf of all of the people watching, I thank you. You've given us 4 wonderful interviews that are jam-packed with information. I hope that we will get lots more from you on the website, on the Facebook page, in your forthcoming book. And I thank you again. A big shout out to Steve Silver, our producer.
That's
And
great.
a huge thank you to Jim Keaton. Thank you so much for taking the time to share all your stories about Helen with the world.
Thank you.
I'm
And
Harvey Brownstone. Thank you very much.
keep listening to the best.
To the best.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.